The neighbors can see you flying around. You want to draw attention to this house,
You've got a whole documentary crew following you around.
Yeah. What is it that you did to get these vampires to trust you, to allow them to open up their world to you?
It took a long time.
Oh, I'm sure.
We gained their trust.
So, is this your first mockumentary?
What do you mean by mockumentary?
Documentary.
Forgive me, documentary.
It's our first venture into the documentary field, yes.
Hi, I'm Raihan Salam. This week, Vice meets Jemaine, Clement, and Taika Waititi, the directors and writers of What We Do in the Shadows.
It's been like this the whole time, Deacon, on dishes, and it still hasn't moved in 5 years. You're a cool guy, but you're not pulling your weight in the flat.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that I'm cool.
No, that's not the point, though. You're missing
no, I
the
know.
point.
Not a
I know.
flat meeting about how cool you are.
When you get 3 vampires in a flat, obviously there's going to be a lot of tension.
Viago was an 18th century dandy.
A ghost cop! So, you guys have been working in this world for a long time. You've been comedians, you've been filmmakers.
I thought you meant in the world where vampires
On Earth.
Well, that world too, obviously. But so in this world, tell me about the difference between getting a project like this made versus, kind of getting a kind of bigger budget kind of movie.
Well, we actually pitched this idea in Hollywood a couple of years ago, and well, firstly, their eyes are kind of glazed over once we mentioned vampires. And then their eyes glazed over even more, like a double glazing.
One eye glazed,
said that
and then the second eye glazed.
just sort of clouded over, and then they kind of fell asleep when we said that there were no parts for big stars in the film, and that we just wanted to use our friends.
Despite the fact that you guys had a track record, despite the fact that you guys have made things before that have been well liked.
Understandably,
well.
they can't really sell a film without,
Yeah.
At the moment,
stars.
it's hard to sell a film that has a low budget, and we knew we wanted to have a low budget.
So that we could have all the freedom of just doing whatever we wanted.
Why didn't you want to have, kind of famous actors if that would make it more saleable? Like, what was it? It was just because you had particular people in mind for the roles?
I think the style of this, like setting it in New Zealand with, in that, and also like not having, because it's a mockumentary, like not having super recognizable people was actually quite important. And,
We'd also have to tell our friends that you're not going to be in the movie anymore.
Because Johnny Depp's playing your part.
There is something about these characters. These vampires are kind of marginal guys, and the fact that it takes place in New Zealand, some would say, somewhat marginal place. One of the characters talks about having, his coffin bouncing around from place to place and finally winding up in New Zealand sometime in the 20s. But there is this way that, like, gosh, we have guys who live in castles, and yet here we are. Like, was that really central to the movie for you, that they'd be in this kind of
New
Zealand,
no castles
kind of,
anywhere in New Zealand. So it's like, they would have got there. I imagine that they, because in the 1800s, people, like New Zealand was advertised as like this great new destination, or the land of milk and honey and stuff, and they and people went down there, and it was like the piano. It was just muddy, and like there was nothing there, and it was really boring. And
The movie,
people
not
were
the
just
instrument.
it looked like a piano, and people were really depressed. And and if you're a vampire and you think, oh man, this is it forever. Then
I was going to buy a castle.
a lot of
no
disappointment.
castles.
No castle, can't build a castle.
We think of them though as being chased right across the world, further and further south until New Zealand's basically the last place they can go.
Do you feel like that shapes the kind of the music and art that comes out of New Zealand, just the sense of being kind of on the edge of the world?
We're isolated. Yeah.
It's isolated art.
Maybe.
It is. I feel people often say it's a little bit like, mind you, I think Iceland is probably even more upbeat than New Zealand in its art. But New Zealand's known for like dark, it's like dark humour. All movies are, have got like a sort of dark edge to them.
How did that influence you when you were young, even before you guys met? Like when you guys were watching television, the fact that there were like, 2 or 3 channels, kind of how do you think that shaped your cultural consumption?
2.
And
There were 2 channels. Well, you just absorbed everything that you saw on TV because there were no other options, and so it's not that you could really choose what to watch. And you just You just suck it up.
Do you think that's part of what made you guys want to do your own thing, to kind of be creative in this way because you had to be, that you kind of had to kind of come up with your own genre?
Also, like, we had a great mix of American and British comedy, and like the best of both worlds.
So what is it like, when you're taking a film like this outside of New Zealand? I mean, do you feel like, it connects with audiences, or do you think that there's something that's missed? There's something kind of distinctive and particular about that sensibility that, doesn't necessarily translate?
Whenever we started to do theatre shows and stuff, Taika and Brett McKenzie and I would travel, people in New Zealand would say, I think they won't get it over there, but it doesn't really apply that much, just the way...
New Zealand didn't have much confidence in its own content back then as well.
No.
Especially in comedy.
It's different
People
now.
were like, why are you guys bothering with this? It's like, get a real job.
We understand things from America and New Zealand as you understand things from Britain here. And,
there is a sweetness to it, though. I mean, this movie in particular, when you were talking about, people's eyes glazing over at the prospect of another vampire movie, it is so striking that there's something kind of fuzzy about these vampires. And I kind of wonder, I mean, that is something that's been true of your work in the past. There's a kind of sweetness to it. And I wonder, is that intentional, or are you guys trying to make it really mean and aggressive and it just comes off that way?
No, I think being from New Zealand, everything is kind of polite. It's just polite comedy. It's, like pot comedy and like dude comedy. And but we're not really like that down there. We're not those kind of, it's just polite. It's like, we don't want to get in the way.
If you were to personify New Zealand, it would be a very big, bulky man who's very insecure. Do you like me? That's how I play
do
him.
wonder, does the aggression kind of get channeled in some other way? Or is it just not there?
I think this is, even though it is kind of sweet, this is probably the darkest comedy that we've done.
There is a lot of murder and blood.
There's
drinking.
murder.
That's true.
Yeah, we've put that in.
Now, when you say that there wasn't this interest in Hollywood, then how did you guys go about getting the movie made? You had a short film that was very well received, but then what happened next? What were the next steps?
Actually, the short film we kept a secret for a long time, but we were financed privately through a producer here in the States.
Got it.
And because in New Zealand you get funding through the New Zealand Film Commission is the usual way to do it, but it's quite a bureaucratic system and it's taxpayer money, so you've got to go through there's a lot of these channels you've got to go through, and often involving script development.
We would have had to hand in our script, and they would have had notes on it about particular storylines and lines and things like that, and we knew we were going to use it as a basis to improvise from.
Yeah, we knew we would find the true story like a documentary in the edit.
Were there any things that surprised you about the process of making the film? Now, given that it was improvised, kind of were there places the story took you because of the performances, or did you have a pretty clear sense of where you wanted to wind up?
We knew where the story was going to wind up. We had a script, but we wouldn't show the actors the script. Only Taika and I knew where it was going, and the crew, but we tried to surprise the actors to get their reactions and to get their natural, cadences and speaking and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I'm agreeing with all that. I was there.
You guys have known each other for 20 years, and
Yes.
you're still able to work together. I mean, tell us a bit about that.
We work together through our assistants. We communicate. That's how we communicate.
But we do other stuff as well, so it's not constant. So
We see other people.
We
have
see
that
other
arrangement.
people.
Yeah.
Was there one person who was kind of the instigator, and then the other person was kind of like, oh, I'm going to keep up? Or does that change from, kind of one of you to the other?
I think depending on who you're talking to, the answer will change.
we'll both say
that we're the leader and the other one's keeping up.
But you keep it from the other one, just to
for
spare
sure.
their egos.
Oh, no, yeah.
This
They'll tell me
project,
off otherwise.
Taika's been doing a lot of drama kind of stuff lately, so this was, I was trying to get him back into comedy.
Use your legs. Wow. Step back and block high. Okay, and punching high. Yep. High. Yep.
And how do you guys divvy up the work, given that you guys are very close collaborators, given that you guys, both have top billing as directors and writers of the film, is there,
only billing
niche?
as directors and writers? If you look at the poster, because I'd have more experience working with crews and like schedules and kind of that side of filmmaking, so I sort of took care of most of that technical stuff, and then because we didn't show the actors the script, Jemaine would just work closely with them and explain what was happening in the scene and
what we wanted to get out of
shape the scenes that way. Yeah.
Do you guys feel comfortable working with other writers and directors, or do you kind of imagine, your favorite work, your best work is when you guys have that control over the process? This
is the first time I've co-directed something. It was good. Sometimes working with other writers is hard. We've written together for a long time, so it's a bit easier. So tell us about working in the United States as opposed to working in New Zealand, and just the roles you pursued and the frustrations, perhaps. Or we love America. It's so good to us. It's a very good country.
It is true. We were doing things in New Zealand, mostly theatre, and if it weren't for our success in America, we probably wouldn't work that well in New Zealand.
New Zealand wouldn't have given us any chances.
So it's literally the fact that you proved yourself in this.
Yeah. Taika was nominated for an Oscar for his first short film, and if it weren't for that,
I wouldn't be making films.
He wouldn't have made wouldn't have been able to make another film.
They kind of made me. The government made me do more films after that.
On one level, you could say New Zealand is this place that's kind of bicultural because you have the indigenous component, you have the Maori component, and then you have this, kind of from the British Isles component. But then now that you have this big Asian influx, you have Pacific Islanders from other parts of the region who are settling. I imagine that has to have led to some cultural change.
I think it's slowly getting better. For instance, when we did the short film version of Shadows in 2005, and you've seen the way we dress with these frilly shirts and everything. We did one scene where we walked through the main street of Wellington, and it was a Friday night, which is a big rugby night, and rugby is sort of like a religion in New Zealand, and so everyone was out in the streets, men and women, as well, were doing this to us. But we would walk down the street and basically we just got called homos and fags the entire way down this big stretch from guys and girls. And
you got to admit some of the girls were into it occasionally.
When we go into town, we must try to blend in.
Just walking the streets, coming into town, is really cool because just for one brief moment, I feel...
But then cut to 2012 when we tried to recreate that scene, because we thought, it's really interesting to get those comments from people. So we went down the street and we couldn't find anyone who would call us that.
We'd written it into the script because we were expecting people to do it, to yell out homo at us, but it didn't happen once.
So New Zealand's become a lot more tolerant of frilly shirts.
Why don't you girls smell your own crotches, huh?
Come on.
What are you talking about? We don't smell our own crotches, we smell each other's crotches, and it's a form of greeting.
You're on camera, mate. Don't do it.
What?
It's okay, because I know this guy. It's Count Fagula.
Hey, don't swear.
Sorry,
we're werewolves.
Not swear.
What are we?
Werewolves, not swear.
One thing I wonder about is just, given these kind of two, kind of fundamental streams of New Zealand's culture, if some of the qualities you're identifying, that kind of diffidence, that insecurity you say, is this something that is coming from one half? Is this coming from, let's say, the kind of, the British half, or is it also coming, do they reinforce each other in this way?
I would say the British half, but also an older generation.
Because it seems as though, kind of...
Our generation and younger don't care. They don't care. But the older generation were very sceptical, and when we were trying to, do stuff, get TV shows or whatever in New Zealand when we were younger, that generation would stop our generation.
And still a lot of that generation run things in the TV world and stuff, and it's really hard to convince them of stuff.
Is it fair to say that people of Indigenous origins in New Zealand, kind of have a more...
Yeah.
I mean, are there barriers still? I mean, kind of, is there a sense in which, kind of in terms of having a public profile, in terms of being
there are barriers,
being
but no one in New Zealand will admit it.
I think less so than in other countries, though.
So, there's more of a sense of ownership. There's more of a sense of, actually,
a lot more inclusive, and Yeah, a lot more opportunities. Like we have a Māori TV channel. We've got we've got a Māori, we've got 2 Māori political parties, who have seats in Parliament. We've got we're a lot more involved.
This is a bit silly, but I mean, when you're telling the vampire story, clearly these are all guys with silly accents. But I mean, is this also partly an immigrant story as well?
Yeah, that's how we thought of it.
Yeah. I think vampires are great. You can look at them as basically anyone who lives in the margins, or anyone who's who has trouble fitting in. They definitely represent immigrants.
And also, not only are they out of their countries, they're out of their time, their centuries, they're from different centuries.
And they also represent smaller subcultures, goths and like emos, and any group that's like small and marginalised. I think that it's like a perfect parallel for. Because like when we were walking through town, like we'd dressed up like this, you'd see. I remember seeing like a couple of these goth kids who like sort of looked over at us like, oh wow, there's some different people, some people like us.
The reason I brought you here is to tell you that I'm a vampire. Stu took it pretty well. He's definitely my best mate, and I'm not going to eat him. If they ever offer you spaghetti, you shouldn't eat it.
I think they offered me biscotti.
Vampire mates don't eat human mates. And no matter how much I wanted to eat him, I would never eat him because he's my mate. Hey, Stu.
Yeah.
One thing I found cool about it is that even though it is about a subculture, or let's say a marginalized group, these vampires, it's also just about their internal dynamics rather than purely about how other people look at them. It's kind of about how they deal with each other, and I thought that was kind of striking. Was that something that you kind of would want to see more of in kind of accounts of, let's say, immigrant subcultures or whatever else, just kind of, more of an internal perspective, like kind of what do they think rather than how are they affected by groups outside of them?
I think so, yeah. I think that what's relatable is just that it's a pretty universal story, about a group of, it's just like a family, like my character's kind of like the mum, his character's like the dad in the family, and then, and Deacon's like the teenage son, and then they get this new kid come in to the fold and disrupt everything. And
we also have a grandfather character, but he's 8,000 years old.
It's just a British sitcom, really.
Are there any other stories that you guys, have in mind that you guys want to pursue in the coming years?
We've done a few shows in New Zealand where we use video and put it in a live theatre place, and we've talked about doing another one of those with some of our other New Zealand
friends.
Yeah,
no roles for Johnny Depp in that either.
It would be good to bring it here though, to America. We're writing a TV show idea, which is an anthology, each episode being a different kind of world or genre. And so that'll be a place for lots of ideas that we've had, and we'll get other writers, hopefully, if it goes ahead, to join us on that.
Gentlemen, you are most welcome.
Nick is so much fun.
I'm a vampire.
Vampire!
So where can people find the movie?
What we do in the shadows, it opens in New York and LA first on the 13th of February, and then on the 20th it goes to 10 more cities, and the 27th another 10, something like that.
Slowly creeping
across America.
The virus.
Thank you very much, guys.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.